Don't say congratulations, but you know they watch that shit. In the last video, I said something really vague that didn't really sit that well with me after a few days, and I kind of thought about it, and I said to myself, did I really just tell people to grab any year 2 wide receiver they want? Like, at first, I meant it as, like, a general thing, like, you can't go wrong. But then I realized, I'm really just telling people, oh, I didn't say that guy, so don't blame me if I say that guy doesn't work out. I really honestly thought that comment was as soft as baby you know what. So in this video today, we're going to play a game. We're going to play draft or pass on the year 2 wide receivers this year. Do I want to draft the former rookies last year that are now going into year 2, or will I pass on them and let my league mates take them? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. So let's roll the intro. Before I go in and discuss the first group of wide receivers that are going very early in ADP that are turning into their sophomore season this year, I just wanted to talk about and explain why I wanted to make this video. Fantasy football is always about drafting the explosion player, the guy that has his career year, his best seasons, and a lot of times you can take advantage on what ADP prices people at in their sophomore seasons. Sometimes players are really, really good in their rookie season, and we expect them to follow up with a high-end season the following year, i.e. CJ Stroud last year. If you took him early in your drafts, you were not rewarded with that feeling because he was just so overpriced that you didn't get to enjoy the asset that was CJ Stroud, even though it was a bad year. And in the latter case, where this really helps us out in fantasy, is a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba last year, who took over the starting wide receiver job once DK Metcalf got hurt and never looked back and was basically a wide receiver 1 ever since. This was a player a year ago that costed maybe an 8th and 9th round pick. The bottom line is, it didn't cost you a whole lot to get that elite production out of him in your drafts, which is why understanding which players to draft and not draft in year 2 are so important, because sometimes the projections or the images that we create in our minds for fantasy football, excitement of what could be, actually takes away from what the reality is right in front of us. That's enough rambling out of me. Let's talk the first group of wide receivers going in that early first round, front end of the second round. That would be Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr., and finally Ladd McConkey. Now, these are all players that are well warranted of their ADP. So just going to briefly say draft all 3. There's a reason why it takes basically a top 20 pick to get any one of those 3, and it's for a very good reason. So obviously drafting, I'm not going to say don't draft Brian Thomas Jr. I'm not going to say don't draft Malik Nabers, because I loved Malik Nabers last year and nothing's changed since then. Now let's move on to Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 15 on Underdog right now. And no, his price hasn't changed specifically in ADP on Underdog, but it's interesting to notice which wide receivers around Marvin Harrison Jr. are actually changing ranks while he's just staying afloat at wide receiver 15. With the news of Jonnu Smith being traded away from the Dolphins, the ADPs of Garrett Wilson and Tyreek Hill have affected this. Garrett Wilson was above Marvin Harrison Jr. when I first made a video on his year 2 breakout, and now Garrett Wilson is ranked below Marvin Harrison Jr., which I agree with, and now Tyreek Hill is ranked above Marvin Harrison Jr., which, again, we've talked about Tyreek Hill a few times on this channel. I'm not too sure if I want to give my stamp of approval of we need to draft him right now or we need to hold on. I still need to see more. I still need to see more training camp, more news, more physical things. Like, I need to actually evaluate this with my own set of eyes. I'm going to continue to beat the drum to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. this season. I think we're going to see a explosion or surgence in his career this year. But with wide receivers jumping around him in ranking on Underdog, it's pretty clear to me that we're not going to get a discount on Marvin Harrison Jr. this summer. Wide receiver 15, maybe he goes to wide receiver 16, but we're not going to be drafting him as a mid to back end wide receiver 2 in fantasy. That doesn't mean he's not a draft. I'm still going to go ahead and say Marvin Harrison Jr. is a draft, but let's just be noted that it's not going to come at a discount this year. So if you want him, you're going to have to go get him, just like last year. Let's go down the list and go to our next wide receiver, Kansas City wide receiver Xavier Worthy, who comes in at wide receiver 23. And let's leave the legality issues and all of that stuff aside because we really don't know what's going on. None of us are experts in the law, but if you are, definitely drop a comment and let me know because I'm not going to act like I know anything about the law. We're probably not going to know anything for sure until August or September, so let's just go ahead and assume that nothing is going to happen to Xavier Worthy in terms of being punished by the law. And we're going to have him for 17 games unless he's injured for some reason. And I'm going to have to say Xavier Worthy, for me, again, is going to be a pass this year. And I know he was really good at times last year when he became the man. But I would argue a lot of things broke right for him. He had 8 total touchdowns. Xavier Worthy was very impressive. Finished as wide receiver 33 on 9 total touchdowns. Sorry about that. He bursted right onto the scene week 1. Had a rushing and a receiving touchdown. He was getting plays designed for him. He looked amazing. But now in 2025, we have to add Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice back into this offense. They need their targets. They need their opportunities as well. And I'm worried. Does that mean Xavier Worthy gets lost in the mix? Does that mean Xavier Worthy is the guy? Because I think Rashee Rice is way too much of a target hog for Xavier Worthy to still be that number 1 target getter or the point of attack in this offense. So he was getting rushing opportunity, getting receptions, had 9 total touchdowns, and was the wide receiver 33. But now, we're going to add a guy in Rashee Rice who could take 120 targets away, a guy in Isaiah Pacheco who is, in the past proven that he can handle a workload. Not saying he's going to go back to being a high-end RB2 or anything like that, but this is a guy that can handle the backfield, and I'm worried that Xavier Worthy gets lost in the mix. If you want this wide receiver 23 price tag to pay off, it seems like to me the only pathway to get there is you're going to need 10 to 12 touchdowns, maybe even more from Xavier Worthy. And guys that usually on other teams score 10 or more touchdowns, the worst one I could find last year was Jordan Addison, finished as wide receiver 21. And that was with 1 more touchdown than Xavier Worthy, who finished as wide receiver 33. I think if you're not getting 12 touchdowns from Worthy, it's really hard to pay off at this ADP. So I'm going to pass and just look at other players going in that range. Next up, wide receiver of the Chicago Bears coming in at wide receiver 33 on Underdog. That's Rome Odunze. And with Rome, there's really not much else to say than I'm going to draft him. I'm getting a guy that is potentially a number 2 wide receiver in his offense, the second in command in the Bears offense. And he's wide receiver 33 versus the Xavier Worthy price tag of wide receiver 23. I can still wait back in my drafts and get a former first-round pick wide receiver in, maybe he's not in as successful or proven in an offense like the Kansas City Chiefs, but I know there's going to be plenty of opportunity. I know I'm going to get more opportunities in Rome Odunze than Xavier Worthy. Maybe not more touchdowns, but more targets, more opportunity. We really have to take a step back and just observe what this situation is for Rome Odunze going into year 2. No, I'm not going to make the correct correlation that, JSN had a new coordinator in year 2 and he exploded, so that means Rome Odunze has to do the same. No, that's probably not how it's going to go. But there is a new coordinator. There is a new head coach. And these are proven guys with success around the NFL, not to mention their OC is very well connected in the Sean Payton tree. I know normally we like to trust the McVay, Shanahan type of coaching tree, but when you come from a Sean Payton work environment, you know what you're doing in the NFL. You have a job for a reason. I don't know a lot about Declan Doyle, or even if I'm pronouncing his name right, but this OC coming from Sean Payton, I trust it. If Rome Odunze was somebody going maybe at wide receiver 28 or a little closer to closer to Xavier Worthy, I would say, yeah, there's some risk baked into this ADP. But at wide receiver 33, I really don't think we're factoring in any risk at all. There really is just only upside at this point. If he's finishing as a top 30 wide receiver, it's better than what you drafted him for, so that's a win. The next year 2 wide receiver we're going to talk about, member of the San Francisco 49ers, coming in at wide receiver 41 on Underdog, that's Ricky Pearsall. And until I see a report that Brandon Ayuk will not be placed on the PUP list and he will be ready for week 1, I'm assuming Ricky Pearsall is the number 2 behind Jawan Jennings, who, yeah, he ran away with the job last year, but I don't trust that that's a legit wide receiver 1 who's taking away 120 targets and nobody else can have them. It felt more like last year Pearsall was always playing behind the 8 ball. You know, he had the offseason incident, wasn't ready right away for the season. Things like that do matter. He's going to have a full offseason now where he can work with the team. And I think he's going to get more opportunities in year 2 versus year 1. Jauan Jennings might be right now the wide receiver that Brock Purdy trusts more. But that doesn't mean Ricky Pearsall can't make his way or make his stamp on the 49ers offense going forward in 2025. At wide receiver 41, it's starting to feel like if he climbs anymore, it's going to be a little pricey. But for right now, he's the 3rd target getter because we have to factor in George Kittle. Maybe even the 2nd best target getter in that offense if he passes Jauan Jennings. So at wide receiver 41, I feel really good about him. At wide receiver 41, I feel really good about Ricky Pearsall. So he's a draft. Getting down to the final 2 players that we're talking about. Of course, there's more wide receivers that we aren't going to talk about, but we still have just 2 more. And if you stuck around, you made it this far into the video, thank you so much. Smash that like button for your boy. I would truly appreciate that. Now let's talk Keon Coleman, wide receiver 53 on the Buffalo Bills. I don't want to be that guy that's got to be different just to have a different opinion. But I feel like I'm going to pass on Keon Coleman's ADP at this point. I don't really think it's that much of a value, if I'm being honest. Put yourself in my shoes real quick. Last year, you didn't really know too much about Keon Coleman other than he was a rookie from FSU, and the Buffalo Bills needed a wide receiver. So they took him. Everything makes sense here, right? Everyone's telling you last year, draft Keon Coleman. This is the rookie wide receiver. It's not Malik Neighbors. It's not Marvin Harrison Jr. It's not Ladd McConkey. They're telling you it's this guy, Keon Coleman. And now me, a Ladd McConkey truther, a guy that loves Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., I'm freaking out here. I'm like, we don't know anything other than this hypothetically is a good fit, so we have to draft him. Like, that's what we were saying a year ago about this guy. We're saying draft him because he's going to make a big step. He's going to be exactly what the Bills need. He wasn't what the Bills needed last year, if I'm being honest. It felt like the Bills were happier to use Amari Cooper. So I'm not going to really be that happy to draft Keon Coleman here. It's not that if I take Keon Coleman here, I'm going to lose my fantasy league. I just don't think the potential is worth the risk. I just don't want to be a part of it this year. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope everyone can come back to the comments and be like, you said don't draft Keon Coleman. But I really don't feel any remorse about it right now. And someone you should be considering, we've already made a video about him. Instead of Keon Coleman, this year 2 wide receiver, coming in at wide receiver 65, it's Xavier Legette. And this is a draft, simply because what's it going to cost you? Somewhere where you would be deciding, do I want this kicker or that kicker? This backup quarterback or that backup quarterback? This starting defense or that one? Xavier Legette, no, he did not have a really good rookie season by any means, but did show promise in his rookie season and developed a connection with Bryce Young in the red zone. And that's something that's going to translate throughout both of their careers as long as they're playing together. The chemistry these two have developed last year will carry over into 2025. And no, that doesn't mean Xavier Legette will outperform Ted McMillan, but in fantasy football, we like touchdowns. We like red zone opportunities. And Xavier Legette has proven himself in those positions time after time last year. The risk would be, if anything happened to Bryce Young, or if Ted McMillan became a superstar, this pick really can't pan out. But where you get to draft him, such a low ADP, probably not even going to be a guy worth rostering. Otherwise, you're probably going to drop whoever you take in this round anyway. Might as well take a chance on Xavier Legette. And that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. If you stuck around this entire video, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're new here, you like fantasy football content, make sure you subscribe down below. Doesn't cost you a thing. Make me really, really happy, and I would appreciate that. But as always, thank you guys for watching. My name is Turtle. This is Outlier Fantasy, and I will see you in the next video. Wow, you stuck to the end of this video? Thank you so much. If you're new here, make sure you check out one of these videos on the screen right now. And don't forget, before you leave, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any fantasy football videos on this channel. And that's all I got for you guys. I'll see you in the next one.